All right. So tell us who you are. What's your name and position and that kind of stuff?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Camryn. I'm a school social worker for Alpine Union School District. I got my undergraduate degree in psychology, so I also thought that was the route I was going to stay with. But then I actually got my master's in social work. And now I'm working as a school social worker with TK all the way through middle schoolers.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so where did you go to school?
I went to Cal State Long Beach for my undergraduate degree, and then I went there for my master's as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Um, and so are you from that area?
I am. I grew up in Long Beach.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's okay. So um when you I want to go back to your undergraduate because most of these folks are first and second year college students.
Yes, yeah.
What was your freshman year and sophomore year like as far as what you thought you wanted to do and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I got my undergraduate degree in psychology and I was actually in a program called Build, which is like it I grew up in like kind of a low income household and so Build gave me the opportunity to get a full ride for college. Otherwise, I
Oh, cool.
really wouldn't have been able to afford it. So this program Build was preparing me for a PhD program in clinical psychology. So while I was in my undergraduate degree, I was doing research on domestic violence. So I was visiting like shelters in LA and I was interviewing the women there and I was doing like running statistics and like helping write papers with a professor at my school. Um, but through that experience, I actually realized I don't really like research, honestly, and I couldn't do that for like a full career. And if you pursue a PhD, like you have to really, really enjoy research. And I personally didn't. I found like what I really liked was interviewing the woman and working with the community. Um, so that kind of led me to go the social work route because I was like, I don't know if I can like totally commit to 6 years of a PhD program. I do want to be a therapist, but I think a master's in social work makes more sense for me. So,
Okay, so that's a really important distinguish because like what a lot of people don't get is that a PhD is a research degree
yes, yes, yeah.
and a degree in social work is an application degree.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what was it like to transition to social work from psych? So what
Uh,
was that like first step into social work? Was it weird or did it fit?
it it made perfect sense because I felt like psychology, like I really enjoyed it, but like it was not quite it for me just because I really wasn't super into the research and writing and statistics. Um, so I felt like social work made so much more sense for me. And then once I joined my program and I got to experience two different internship sites, um, and I was working with teenagers and kids, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Oh, awesome. And so like for me, doing the groundwork and working with the people, that's like skeeves me out. And so
Hmm.
I love the research and the
Hmm.
stats and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And that's why I went the science route versus
yeah,
the functioning route.
yeah.
So what okay, so what is your job now?
So I'm a school social worker. And like I said, I work with TK all the way through middle school. And so a lot of people, when I tell them that, they're like, what do you mean you're doing like counseling with TK students? Which I get sounds kind of funny. But I'm kind of really working when it comes to the TK students with behaviors. So these kids are 4 or 5. They've never been in school before. A lot of the kids I work with have ADHD. So it's just super difficult for them to even be in a classroom. So I'm kind of working a lot with behaviors. And then as far as my middle schoolers and such, I do like a lot more counseling. I do SEL lessons for the entire school. Social work is so cool because it's such a broad scope and you could really do so much with it.
So what's the okay, so have you had behavioral training like RBT, ABA kind of stuff?
No, I haven't. Which is I kind of have just learned by doing. So when I first got here, it was very overwhelming. Like I was having kids like in schools they use the word eloping, which I didn't even know what that meant, but like running out of the
On the
classroom,
way.
stuff like that. Yeah. But no, so I've kind of just learned by doing, but I am getting a credential in play therapy. So that's been helpful.
Oh, cool. So yeah, so we have a behavioral training program at Cuyamaca. So we teach RBT stuff
Yeah.
for our second year students. And so it's funny how they ask you to do it, but not many people get trained in it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then but it's kind of obvious once you start.
Yes.
So yeah, my wife when she taught kindergarten had a lot of we call them runners back then, but
Yes, yeah, yeah.
they panic and they just run, and then
Yeah,
it's like, okay, who's gonna go chase down the kid? I
right,
got him.
right.
Okay, but
Yeah.
um, so so when you say, are you able to diagnose someone as ADHD? Do you have the credential in order to do psychological assessments?
So not within the schools. Within the schools, when you're talking to parents, you have to be very careful what you
Right.
say.
Yeah.
So, but actually this month I can take my test to become a licensed clinical social worker um,
Okay.
because I've got all my hours. So once I get licensed, then if I go the private practice route, then I would be able to diagnose people with things um, like anxiety or depression. Not so much ADHD because that's neurological.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I can diagnose clients I see.
Okay, that's cool. So that's okay.
Mhm.
So what is the credentialing program like? Because that's what a lot of students say, I want to become a therapist. And it's like, regardless of the route you go, that credentialing thing is the thing that keeps popping up for almost everybody that we talk to. So what was it like for you? What is the credentialing process?
So once you get your master's, you're in school for 2 years. And then as soon as you get out of school and you're starting in the field, whether you're working at a school, which is not most people are
Yeah.
going like working in private practice. Um, sorry, you meet weekly with a licensed clinical social worker or any sort of licensed family marriage therapist, and they give you your hours. So I saw someone every week for an hour, and we did what's called supervision.
Right.
And I had to do that. Typically, it takes people 2 years for their master's and then 2 years of supervision, and then they can take the test to become a licensed therapist. For me, it took a little longer because I work in a school and I wasn't able to do supervision over the summer. So for me, it took like about 2.5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So can you describe what supervision means?
Supervision looks like you log on to Zoom and you're talking to a licensed therapist who's already been in the field for like a year and a half, and
Yeah.
you're talking about your clients and what you're dealing with. Um, and what you talk about their experience with them too.
Okay, so it's like you're getting on the job therapy.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, that's cool.
yeah.
How do you log your hours? How do you
Uh,
like just by on the Zoom records, or is there an app, or is there?
I logged them through just an Excel sheet myself, and you have to really be like detailed in the way you do it because you could get audited and everything. But yeah,
Oh, okay, that's cool.
yeah.
All right. So, what's your day like? What describe a day in your life here at work? I know there's no typical day at
Yeah.
school, but 'cause my
Yeah.
wife's been at that district for almost 30 years. So,
Yeah. School social work, I feel like you really have to, for this kind of job, you really have to be go with the flow. Um, it's not like you're working private practice where you have this schedule where like I'm going to see this person at 9, this person. I mean, I try to have a schedule, but it doesn't work like that. I have two walkies on me. I'm at three different school sites, so I get called a lot of the time for like random stuff. I never really know what I'm walking into. It could be for a kid that's having a tough morning. It could be for a kid who's very angry at his teacher and he just ripped up his assignment. And so I'm constantly getting called to stuff like that. But then I also run social groups, and I also do individual counseling sessions with kids here as well.
oh, cool.
Yeah.
So, what's a counseling session with the kid at school like? Because that's a new thing for us old people. Like, before it was like they send you to the nurse, they send you home if you having a bad day. So,
Yeah.
I mean, without obviously can't be specific, but what is it like when you're actually working with a kid at school?
So when it comes to like my elementary school kids and my middle school kids, it's just like a lot of talk therapy. Sometimes I'm seeing kids for like the whole year who are on IEPs,
Okay.
and like
What's
have
your
weekly
education plan,
counseling.
by the way, Miriam?
Yes. Yeah. Um, and then other times I'm seeing kids for like short-term counseling. Maybe they just lost a parent. We have a lot of kids here whose parents are just getting deployed and stuff like that. So I also see kids for like short-term counseling. And then as far as like my 4-year-olds, a lot of the counseling session look like group sessions where we're like just practicing like keeping our hands to ourselves, and basic social skills.
You have the patience for that?
It's funny. When I got hired by Alpine, I was like, I have no interest in working with 5-year-olds. And I told them that. And I don't necessarily have like the kindergarten persona where I'm like super bubbly and enthusiastic. I was like, I just want middle school. But I ended up liking the 5-year-olds more than any other age group, and I have the patience for them. I don't so much have it for like adults. So this job makes more sense for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my wife, but so she said that you're amazing working with a group of kids. I don't know if she's ever told you that, but she said you have that natural teacher ability to like just hold everybody's attention and maintain it. Was being a teacher something you ever thought you would be?
That was, I mean, when I was like 6 years old, I would line up my stuffed animals and like speak to them like I was a teacher. So I think that was always kind of the plan. Um, but I think where teaching has gone, I think it's very difficult. I think there's like a lot of behaviors. I think this job where I get to connect with the kids one-on-one and in small group, and I get to kind of always be the good guy. I'm not really getting anyone in trouble. I get to be everyone's like cheerleader. I prefer that to what teachers go through.
Yeah, and it's like what's interesting is that the teacher can be that person too.
Yes, for
And that's
sure.
like and it's that's the I don't know, that's a hard lesson because the teacher has to cover curriculum
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you have to make sure the kids are healthy.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I do just prefer this work, I would say. I think teachers have a lot more on their plate in certain regards. I like that I get like smaller groups, honestly.
Yeah, that's great.
But you do have to remember in school social worker, you are getting the behavior kids too. So I work with kids with like the most trauma, the biggest behaviors. Like that's my whole caseload, you know?
Right. But those I mean, but the nice thing is that the teacher has to deal with those kids
Yes.
that
Yes.
try to help with those kids.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
And so do you have kids that just come and hang out with you because they're just having a rough day and they're not really counseling, but they just need a space?
100%. I had a kid yesterday pretty much with me all day who just he was having a rough day.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's okay. So, do you have like I know you're on a bunch of different campuses. The campuses aren't far from each other, just
No.
for the people listening.
Yeah.
It's only 3 or 4 minutes between campus, but if you zoom around. But do you have like a where is your office at the district or is it in the one of the campuses or?
So it's cool. I have three different like classrooms, which they're called wellness centers now.
Yeah. Okay.
But my classrooms are where I do my SEL lessons and I do my like counseling sessions as
What
well.
does SDL stand for?
SEL stands for social emotional learning, which is like a
Okay.
big wave in schools right now.
Yeah. Okay. And so, what is okay? So, what is the like a primary lesson that you teach with this?
Um, So a lot of the stuff I do with like the little kids is like talking, just being able for them to like identify their feelings. So I don't know if you could see this on
Yeah.
camera, I have, like little feeling spots, but those are the kind of lessons like I do with them. So it's fun. You get to be like, because I'm not a teacher, I don't have to follow like a strict curriculum and I get to kind of be creative with it, you know?
Right. My our TED, wherever TED is. You need a TED, by the way. Um, we have we have a we got a golden doodle. Have you met Ted?
No.
My wife's kind of nervous to bring him to school, but we
Yeah.
got him to be an emotional support dog
Oh,
for Boulder
cool.
Oaks.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, but then that when she left Boulder Oaks, he was still a puppy. So we're like, well,
Yeah.
he's my emotional support dog on campus.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and he's a 60-pound fluffy golden doodle. Teddy, come here. Teddy, come here. Come here. So I don't know if you can.
Oh, he's so cute.
That's exactly what his job is. He's it's his whole job.
We have dogs come to our school like once a month that are like support animals and like kids love it.
Yeah, that's what we did. That's why
Yeah.
she had a couple of kids that would elope and then would just
Mm.
melt down. And they noticed that the days that the dogs were coming, the kids were perfectly behaved. And she
Of
goes,
course.
"We're getting a dog."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what Ted was initial purpose for. And now he just comes to Cuyamaca's campus and just
Oh,
very
that's
at a
awesome.
desk, just lays in front of class and
That's awesome.
yeah. And it's like so I was when you saw and I saw the little emotional dots, Ted would just have a field day with those. He loves
Yeah.
stuffies. And so he would just like, oh boy. Anyway, so um, we can work on getting you a dog if you want. Okay,
That'd be awesome.
but it's like so the fun thing is that you get to work and do these things. Have you noticed kids getting better, or is it kids getting managed?
Um,
which I know it's a hard,
Yeah, I think I get to see a lot of growth because they're so young when they start school here
yeah,
that they've never been in school before a lot of the time. So I do get to see a lot of growth. Um, I would say I see, yeah, quite a bit of growth because this is a very good school district and I feel like they do get a lot of support, but they're still kids, so they still have off days.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. That's the thing because it's a relatively new thing. I mean, the kids don't didn't typically have this, and there's a lot of school districts that don't have this as well. So that's really cool that we have this because there's three of you now because Atlee.
Yes, Atlee. And then there's Tefane at Boulder Oaks.
Yeah.
And then we have a bunch of wellness coaches now too that work underneath the social workers. So we have a lot of support here.
Okay, so that's the secondary thing I wanted to talk to you before we have to
Yeah.
move away is
Yeah.
what is a wellness coach?
So a wellness coach is kind of like a mini school social worker. So they run groups. They meet with students
Little bunch of little
individually.
sorry. I,
Yeah.
I'm picturing these little people running. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But I think like they had to have experience working with kids in the past, and I think they had to take like an online class in order to become one. And they just need a bachelor's degree. But I'm currently working with three of them, and they're super helpful. And they pretty much do a lot of the work that I do too. They just don't see students with the IEP.
Yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
we have we're working on building a program at Cuyamaca to train wellness coaches. So
Oh, wow, cool.
yeah, so it's like you need X number, you need a child development class, you need a psychology class, and you need to be working towards your degree. And you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
be working, you can get one. So as
Oh,
long as you're
cool. Yeah.
enrolled.
Uh-huh.
But it's like, okay, so and that's why that one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is that do you do internships for wellness coaches? Would you like take students in that are working toward this just to see like there's a with the therapy stuff, there's a really fine line, especially with private clients. But
Hmm.
because you're in the school setting, could you actually have students come and work with you just as like a volunteer basis? I don't know how that works.
Yeah, so like two of my wellness coaches right now like are kind of like part interns and part wellness coach
Oh,
because they're
okay.
currently getting their masters in social work. So definitely.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so the idea is to try to get students because a lot of students think that they want to work with kids, but they don't understand, and this is the hard question now. How do you deal with the stuff that the kids bring to you? How do you manage the secondary trauma from the kids? Because I mean, it's been hard just with my wife when she was a kindergarten teacher. Some of the stuff
Hmm.
the kids would say were like, "Wow, how is it?" We have to send the kid home. I'm like, oh.
Hmm. Hmm.
How do you manage to detach a little bit? Or
While I was in grad school, I was working at a place called South Central Youth Justice Coalition, and I was working with kids that have seen like the worst trauma you can imagine in their lives. It was South
yeah,
Central LA. It's a very rough area. So when I was pretty young, I started seeing like some gnarly stuff. And that's when I first had to ask myself that question, like, how can I do this? Because like I'd be like randomly driving and one of my kids would pop into my head.
yeah,
Uh, and so there's still some days that it totally gets to me, especially because they're such young kids and a lot of the problems they have, like they didn't ask for and it's not their fault.
right.
But,
And they don't have the language to
right,
explain it. They just
right.
they just get to feel it without any
Yeah.
consciousness.
Yeah. But I have a lot of close people in my life that I lean on pretty heavily. And I would suggest that if you're going to be in the world of therapy and you want to be a therapist, I suggest you go to a therapist. I think it's valuable for learning what it's like to be on the other side. And I think it's super helpful too.
So is your supervisor provide that counseling for you, or is there another person?
No, I went to like my own therapist.
Okay, so you have your own.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But exercise too. I like exercise like crazy. I actually saw your wife in one of my Pilates classes.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. You said she was. Yeah, she's badass. I think is
Yeah,
what you
she's
said. Yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
she's nuts. And yeah, I agree. It's like we both work out a lot, and then she's
Yeah.
just like one level above me. I'm like, dang it.
Yeah.
But yeah, trying to tamp her down is tough. It's like
Yeah.
okay. We actually took a rest day on Thursday,
Oh,
and
wow.
I had to talk her off the ledge like all day Thursday, taking a rest
Yeah.
day.
That's
Like,
pretty much where I'm at when I take a rest day.
yeah, it's like, but so that's and that the idea of being physically healthy really helps the mentally healthy.
Yes.
And it's like, so what is it, there's a what's the key that you use that when you if you try you can't reach a kid or you're just having a crap day. What do you just go vent to somebody, or what do you, or do you write it down, or do you schedule a counseling appointment, or
I do vent to my friends and family. And then, I do have tough days too where I'm not as patient. And I'll take a step back on those days and ask myself, okay, what could I done differently here with this kid? Because that clearly wasn't working. And I clearly was having a bad day. And sometimes you do. And,
right?
I come back the next time. I try to come back refreshed and with clear eyes, and we try something new. They're kids, they're unpredictable. Not everything always works. And there's tough days here. There's tough days where they're frustrated and I'm frustrated too. That's part of the
Oh,
job.
yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
that what you just said is being able to step back
Yeah.
and look at the whole situation.
Yeah.
And that's okay, that's really cool. So that's a way of what can I do differently because you can't change the kid. I like
Yeah.
that. That's
And something that we do here too is it's very rare that I can't connect with a kid, and it's very frustrating for me when I can't. But we work as a team here. There's some kids where my principal connects with them a little better and they respond better to her. So she'll take the calls on those kids, whereas there's some kids that respond a lot better to me and that I know a little bit better, and that so we really work as a team too.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Um, so in the last question here, I don't want to burn too much more of your time. What, what's your future goal? What's your, like, so now you're 20 something years old at this point, I'm
Hmm.
guessing.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm 26.
26, yeah. And so you got a lot of career ahead of you.
Yes, I know.
And so, no, but I mean, do you see yourself going toward the school psychologist route or going more toward the counseling route? Because they're both, because you could easily do your job for the rest of your life
For
and
sure.
do fine,
Yeah,
but
for
there's
sure.
always that, is there a drive to go do something more, or
Well, right now I'm going to take my test to get licensed as a therapist so I could work at the school and then I could have like telehealth clients on the side, which is some nice extra side cash. And I'd be getting to do therapy with maybe some like young adults, which I think I'd really like. I'm also thinking about maybe going back to school for my admin credential. Because right now I'm in charge of a bunch of wellness coaches and I really enjoy it. So I'm like, with an admin credential, I could lead like a bigger mental health team.
or
So,
you can become a supervisor and
right,
then,
which is something I'm interested in.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah, and then potentially I'd like to teach at a community college too. So that's something I've thought about as well.
yeah, and that's where the like, so the professor role,
Hmm.
so you have to, it's really kind of fun because like I've come about this completely backwards. I was wanted to go to my PhD, wanted to get my research. I love doing research. And one of the people I did research for said, you need to go teach and stop doing research because you're happy when you teach and you're miserable doing research. And
Uh-huh.
I had to step back and go, ah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now I get to do research for fun
Uh-huh.
and I teach. But
Hmm.
yeah, so all right. Is there anything else you want to add about your job? What are the last always quite? Have you ever listened to Ologies with Ali Ward?
Mm-mm.
Oh, she's a science writer and she does all these podcasts, and
Yeah.
that's kind of why how I get my ideas to ask questions from her podcast. But
Oh, cool.
at the end of the thing, she always asks, "Is there one thing that you absolutely love about your job, and there's one thing that you kind of wish you could change about your job? So what's the thing that you love the most about what you do?"
The thing I love most about what I do is I do not feel like this is work. I genuinely enjoy it. I play with kids all day. I connect with kids all day. I joke around with them. I this is not work. This is awesome. I don't
Yeah,
think a lot of people get to say that, and it's meaningful,
yeah,
I do feel
that's
like I'm
really
making a difference. Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
I feel the same way, by the way. My job.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
best job ever.
Yeah. That's
That's
awesome.
that's cool. Okay, so what would you change about your job?
What would I change about my job? Um, it's a school social work job. You see some sad, heavy stuff. And I'm dealing with some crazy behavior sometimes. Like I've got chairs thrown at me, I've chased kids. Like that stuff's not totally fun, but when you work through that stuff with kids, it's a win. And it's a challenging job for
Yeah,
sure.
the fact that you did not get hit by a chair today is a win.
Yeah. Yeah.
my one of the other people we're going to interview, a former student, she's a behavior analyst and she works
Yes.
at Poway Unified School District.
Yeah,
And she goes, "You learn how to dance."
you do.
And a kid's
Mhm.
swinging at you and you're just dancing around it like,
Yeah.
"No, I'm not going to get mad at you. I'm not going to hit you
Yeah.
back. I'm just
Right.
going to dodge
Right.
and smile and dodge."
Yes.
And she
Yes.
goes, it's if you yeah, it's just not taking it personally, which is
Yes.
that's the hard part, is that when they are really upset at you, not taking it personally.
Right. 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 Which most of the time, I get sad sometimes because I'm close with these kids and I like adore them. But, for the most part, I can be like, hey, whatever this kid's dealing with, it's a lot. It has nothing to do with me.
Is there any class that really stood out to you that like any particular class, or was it your internships that really made you appreciate what you were are now?
I took a play therapy class in school and I loved it. That was one of my favorite classes I took. And then my internship in South Central totally exposed me to a population in a world that I think everyone should be exposed to. It taught me a lot.
Yeah, the people who live in a bubble really need to step outside of their bubble
Yes.
occasionally and just say,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially in Alpine. Alpine's got a good bubble
It
around it.
is a really good bubble and like some of the stuff that there's still kids dealing with heavy stuff anywhere you go, but I was exposed to some pretty insane stuff that now I feel like I can handle anything.
It's so sad, but it's like it's good
Yeah.
for you, but it's like you just when
Yeah.
you realize that that's happening in our
Yeah.
space and our time right around us, and it's just like, wow.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to add to the students?
Nothing else, but if anyone has any questions about a master's in social work or school social work, like please give them my contact info.
Yeah, I'll give them. Yeah, we'll post it when I post the recording. Are you okay with this being put on YouTube?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Just checking. We can post it locally on a Zoom, but if I put it
Uh-huh.
on YouTube, then we can use it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
easier. Okay, so I'll have students email you. I'll put the link. No, I'm just kidding.
Uh-huh.
I'm not that easy. But we'll put the. I'll have the students give you your email, and we're truly trying to push the wellness coach thing to have students get experience
Yeah.
being. We want students have experience doing clinical stuff so that if they go and do it and they hate it, they don't go and spend a master's degree doing it and
Yeah.
realizing they
That's a
don't.
good idea.
That's why I try to tell students who want to become a therapist is be a behavioral therapist. You can,
Yes.
you can go and work with kids right away.
Yeah.
They're difficult and it's
Hmm.
hard. And if
Hmm.
you enjoy it, you can become a therapist.
Yeah, I think the wellness coach would give him pretty much experience as a school social worker, so that would be a great idea for anyone interested.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Thank you so much
Okay.
for your
Yeah.
time. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Nice meeting you.
Yep. Nice meeting you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Okay. All right, Miriam, I'm going to pause the recording.